So the Felipe Massa trial has begun, and this is something I've talked about a couple of times on the channel over the last couple of years. And a lot of us didn't think that it was actually going to get to this point, but it has. Now don't worry, Felipe isn't the one on trial here. He's seeking answers and everything else to do with the outcome of the 2008 Formula 1 season, because he feels that he was a bit, well, shortchanged with everything. All because of an interview that Bernie Ecclestone gave about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that kicked off everything that's led to this. Because a lot of people around the world, not just Massa, feel that the events of what happened in the latter part of 2008 have led to this moment. So let's have ourselves a recap as to what happened in the 2008 season before we get into the nitty gritty of what's been said in this court case, which started on Wednesday. So that's the, let me check my calendar here, the 29th of October 2025, just in case you're watching this at a future date. Now, during the Singapore Grand Prix of 2008, the first ever race on the streets of the city-state and also the first ever night race in Formula 1, Massa had qualified on pole and was leading the Grand Prix, with championship rival Lewis Hamilton in second place. Massa's Ferrari teammate Kimi Räikkönen was in third. Now, apologies if you've heard this a zillion times before on the channel if you're a regular viewer, but I have to treat everybody like they're a newbie to this situation. And Massa was leading by an okay margin, leading Sir #of by around 3 seconds after about 10 laps. On lap 12, Fernando Alonso, then driving for Renault, pitted. And this was seen as being a bit early in terms of pit stops. Alonso had endured a terrible qualifying session and was down near the back. So the plan identified by people at the time was pit Alonso early, put him on super soft tyres and a decentish fuel load, and send him out into clean air to bang in quick laps and then undercut his way back up the order. That was how it seemed, but 2 laps later, there was a Renault in the wall at turn 17. That was Alonso's teammate, Nelson Piquet Jr. So this caused a bit of a melee, because the rules were at the time that the field would be bunched up first, and then the pits opened up when they were all in the safety car queue. This was a weird rule at the time that was designed to stop cars from taking unnecessary risks when it came to trying to take advantage of a particular situation. A car that was ahead of an accident could push to the pits and get an advantage over somebody that had to clear the incident in question. Another reason this rule existed is because at the time safety car deltas didn't exist, but they would come in for around 2009 or 2010. Needless to say, it's a rule that no longer exists. Rosberg and Kubica were low on fuel and had to pit, so they had to enter the pit lane while it was shut and copped a 10-second stop-go penalty for it. When the pits finally opened for everybody else, virtually everybody came in and took fuel and tyres. And this is where many claim the season was lost for Massa. In the rush to get Felipe back out, he left his pit box with the fuel hose still attached, and nearly crashed into Adrian Sutil's Force India on the way out. Massa stopped at the end of the pits with Ferrari mechanics running after him to remove the hose. Because of all of that craziness, Alonso ended up winning the race, with Rosberg second and Hamilton third. Massa, meanwhile, finished last on the road. Fast forward about 12 months or so and it all came out into the open. Piquet was sacked from Renault, and afterwards he blabbed to Brazilian media that he'd been told to crash by the bosses at Renault, resulting in the Crashgate saga beginning. At the end of it all, Pat Symonds and Flavio Briatore were banned from being in Formula 1 paddocks. Symonds was banned for 5 years, Briatore banned for life. But Briatore's ban was due to 2 things. One is that Briatore had denied his involvement in the affair, despite overwhelming evidence that he was involved in this affair. There was also testimony from somebody known only as Witness X, alleged to be Alan Permain. Symonds had actually confessed to being involved, so they went a little bit easier on him. There's also Max Mosley, then FIA president, allegedly having a bit of personal beef with Briatore, and Briatore was able to appeal the ban in the French courts, who found in his favour. The French courts believed that the ban had been influenced by this alleged personal feud, and Briatore's ban was completely overturned. But he wouldn't come back to Formula 1 for another 18 years or so. So that's Crashgate explained away just very quickly for those who are new to the situation, new to this case, or just new to Formula 1 in general. So this leaves a very big question. Why has Massa decided to do this now and not when it all came out in 2009? For that, we need to go to 2023. Bernie Ecclestone, the former F1 Supremo, was giving an interview with a website called F1 Insider, which I believe is based in Germany. In that interview, the subject of Crashgate came up, and in that interview, Ecclestone said that he and Mosley either knew or felt that something was a bit iffy, but they took no action. Bernie's words were to protect the sport and save it from a huge scandal. Remember, Spygate was the year before. 2 major scandals in 2 years wasn't something that F1 needed, but Bernie later said he doesn't remember giving this interview. Massa was also seriously injured during the 2009 season and was recovering from said injury when all of this came out. So that, plus Bernie Ecclestone's interview, are the reason why this has come out now. The first day of the court case was, as mentioned, the 29th of October 2025. Massa is seeking compensation to the tune of around £64 million from both Bernie and the FIA, as this would fill the gap of his winnings, bonuses and commercial deals that he would have got from being the world champion. Some reports are saying that he's looking to overturn the actual championship so that he would be the champion of 2008, while some are saying that it's just the money he's after. If Hamilton had not overtaken Glock right at the death, Massa would have been Brazil's first world champion since Ayrton Senna in 1991, and winning the title in Brazil would have been massive for the country. So what's been said in court over the last couple of days? The details aren't exactly, well, detailed, but enough has been said by both sides to offer some extra opinions on. Some of it has already been said by people long before the case actually went to the High Court in London, but we can look at what some legal experts have been saying in the courtroom and double check our existing thoughts on things. Or it can at least give us some more material to work with. Nick DeMarco, who is Massa's lawyer and a KC, which stands for King's Counsel, which means a senior lawyer appointed by the monarch, has said that Massa has not run out of time to take this to court, as claimed by Bernie's lawyers, because it wasn't until 2023 that any confirmation of this came out into the public domain. DeMarco said, "After many years, that interview is the first time it became apparent to Mr. Massa that there had been a deliberate concealment of a conspiracy that was known. The defendants are very eager to prevent the court from examining their serious wrongdoing." Mr. DeMarco also went on to say that Ecclestone's team were trying to mischaracterise Massa's case and say that he's out of time, as well as saying that it's the FIA's duty to its members to enforce the regulations. And actually, while we're on the subject of Nick DeMarco, he was part of Alex Palou's legal team in the battle with Zak Brown, and has also represented footballers Ivan Toney and Lucas Paqueta in their gambling cases. He also represented footballer Benjamin Mendy for unpaid wages while at Manchester City, and represented the football club Leicester City over their financial fair play breaches. And as a bit of irony here, his favourite football club is Queen's Park Rangers, a club once owned by Bernie Ecclestone and Flavio Briatore. The shots that Massa's lawyers have been firing across to the other side of the courtroom include the testimonies that Nelson Piquet Jr, Witness X and Nelson Piquet Sr gave to the FIA in the wake of Jr.'s sacking from Renault. Piquet Sr had supposedly indicated privately to an FIA official that the crash might have been deliberate, but because Jr was still under contract with Renault, there was no way he was going to say so out of fear of losing his race seat. As such, it wasn't until Jr was sacked that it all came out into the open. Then there's also the language used in Bernie's interview with the F1 Insider website. In that interview, Bernie's words had been to the effect of, "I feel sorry for Felipe and he was cheated out of the title." And that interview as a whole contradicted the FIA report that it may have been deliberate. In this case, may has become was, and it gave it more definition. Furthermore, Massa's legal team argued that up until that interview with F1 Insider, there was nothing to put Massa on alert that Bernie and Mosley had the evidence required for him to be able to say, "Hang on a minute." If you've got a Motorsport magazine subscription, they've got a lot of stuff on this, and I highly recommend going through what they've written. Some of what they've written I've put into this and extrapolated on just to give you some more insight. Speaking of Motorsport magazine, yesterday they wrote that Massa claimed that he confronted both Flavio and Piquet Jr about Crashgate after it all came out, but both of them denied any wrongdoing. In addition, both Jean Todt and Luca de Montezemolo both had suspicions that Piquet had walled his car on purpose, but Massa didn't believe Todt because he knew that Todt and Briatore weren't exactly mates. Felipe also had no reason to believe that a driver or team would cheat on that level. It wasn't until 2009, almost 12 months after the incident happened and about 9 months or so after Hamilton was officially crowned champion of 2008, that it began to show signs of it actually being real. Put simply, the arguments towards Bernie, FOM and the FIA are, you knew about this and you didn't let anybody know that you knew about this and you've been covering it up ever since. So what's the other side saying? Well, pretty much what we as fans have been saying since Crashgate became a thing in 2009, that Massa wasn't good enough over the course of 2008 to win that championship. Bernie's side of the courtroom is seeing this case as being overly ambitious, and reports coming out of the courtroom over the last couple of days show that Bernie and the FIA's team brought receipts to back it all up. And in an earlier video I did showing why Massa might struggle in this court case, I listed some of the races where he lost points. First is in Australia, the first round of the season, where he spun off at turn 1 on the first lap. He hit David Coulthard later on in that race, and then his engine blew up. In Malaysia, he was on for an easy second place behind his teammate Kimi Räikkönen, but while pushing to keep the pace, he spun off at turn 8, the second of those two medium-speed right-handers over the back end of the circuit, and that was him out of the Grand Prix. So while Melbourne can be a bit ambiguous, we know for a fact that there's 6 points lost here. At Monaco, he took pole and led most of the race, but slid wide in the rain on lap 16 and handed the lead to Kubica. Ferrari then messed up the strategy, pitting Massa too early while Hamilton continued and got the swap over to dry tyres correct. Hamilton won that race, with Felipe in third. In Canada, Ferrari's fuel rig didn't give him enough fuel due to a technical problem, so he had to pit again on the very next lap. Massa did manage to recover though, eventually finishing 5th, so this one's not exactly his fault, but it's still a race where Ferrari lost points. Hamilton crashed into the back of Räikkönen in the pit lane. Massa, without the troubles with the fuel rig, could have won the race instead of Kubica. The British Grand Prix is that famous race at Silverstone where he spun 5 times and finished last on track. To add insult to injury, he was lapped by race winner Hamilton. In Hungary, he had an engine failure. Not his fault, just bad luck. And that's also a race he should have won, and was a race where he was in total control, having swooped around Hamilton at turn 1 at the start. 10 points lost. Singapore, well that's the reason we're here, and in Japan, he hit Hamilton in a dumb move at the chicane and got a penalty when Hamilton was already going to get one, and he would have scored more points because Hamilton was going to finish outside of the points, so without the penalty, he would finish higher up than he actually did. Massa would go on to finish 7th, being somewhat fortunate to get a free position because he made contact with Bourdais, and Bourdais was penalised for it. I'll leave you to do the estimates as to how many points Felipe actually lost over the course of the season relative to Hamilton. But Bernie's legal team has the same opinion that a lot of us do as fans, which is, it was more than just Singapore that cost him the 2008 title. David Quest, who is the King's Counsel representing Bernie in all of this, later added, he claims in excess of £60 million. The facts of these proceedings is that at the Singapore Grand Prix, Mr Massa performed very poorly in that race. He finished in 13th place and scored 0 points, and that was largely due to errors made in the pit stop, running over a member of his pit crew and leaving the pits with the fuel hose still attached. Massa's poor form nor Hamilton's strong form weren't related to the crash. Mr Massa's claim is as torturous as it is overly ambitious. The multi-millionaire Brazil national and resident brings a claim in this jurisdiction of England and Wales founded on an alleged breach of the supranational rulebook of the FIA, a private international sporting organisation domiciled in France and concerns events at and around the Formula 1 Singapore Grand Prix over 17 years ago on the 28th of September 2008. Bernie's lawyers have also pointed to the original court documents that said that Massa wasn't seeking financial compensation for all of this, despite Massa wanting to claim upwards of £60 million in compensation. But it's not like Hamilton never made errors in 2008. He hit Alonso in Bahrain, there was the absolutely dumb accident in Canada where he hit Kimi, and also the start of the Japanese Grand Prix. He also received that iffy penalty in Belgium as well, which funnily enough handed Massa the win. And one thing that can be argued here is Hamilton also lost out because of Crashgate. He was second when the safety car came out, and he finished the race in third, so he dropped a couple of points. Another thing to consider is there's no telling that Massa could have had a standard pit stop and the rest of the season going exactly as it did later on. But really, the best thing to do is to actually settle this out of court, and in effect that would actually be a win for Massa, because settling out of court can imply a bit of guilt. The FIA and Bernie can give Massa the money to go away, and Massa can then be safe in the knowledge that they did this because they knew all along that something was iffy with that race in Singapore that day. Night. However you want to call it. The 3-day trial will conclude today, so that's Friday the 31st of October 2025, and the judge will make a decision later on. It's a civil case, so it's in the hands of the judge rather than a jury. What will the outcome be? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I do still think that this trial is going to be tough to win. The final day of the trial is going on right now, and it will then just be a case of waiting for it all to come to some sort of conclusion. But I do think that Massa does have the right to answers. Did Ecclestone and Mosley know about the crash being deliberate there and then? Did Charlie Whiting know? With Mosley and Whiting, it's a bit tricky because, well, both of them are no longer around. And a lot of people tend to take what Ecclestone says these days with a hefty pinch of salt. If the judge is to award in favour of Massa, the compensation, I think, is likely. But getting the results changed so it says 2007 Kimi Räikkönen, 2008 Felipe Massa, 2009 Jenson Button. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but stranger things have happened, so I think I need to get the postcards out, don't I? So then, a look at what's been going on over 2 of the 3 days of the Felipe Massa court case. Does he actually have a case? Should he be given the compensation? Should he be written down as the actual champion of 2008? Do leave any thoughts down in the designated comment submission zone and get a discussion going. And while scrolling down, if you think I've made some good points or you've got caught up on all the proceedings, then do give the video a like so I know a good job was done. And for more stuff from the channel, get subscribed and also get the bell on so you never miss out on anything else that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the rad lads over at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help with image purchases or anything else, there's a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and anything else you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks if you want to top up my coffee cup, and memberships so you can do Patreon but without going to Patreon. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.